Hey, welcome to 12 Tone. As a professional music listener, I often get questions like this.
Hey, 12 Tone, how do I get better at listening to music?
And it's tricky to answer because I don't think there's better or worse ways to listen to music. However you're hearing it is perfectly fine. That said, if you want to make music, analyze music, or appreciate the subtle nuances of the music you love, there are some skills that'll make that a whole lot easier. Some of these are obvious, like learning to recognize chords, rhythms, and intervals, while others are a bit more subtle, like phrasing, motifs, dynamics, and form. But there's one skill that almost always gets overlooked, and it's a shame because I think it's the most important one. I call it orchestral listening, and it's a pretty big deal. This video is sponsored by Skillshare. So what is orchestral listening? Basically, it's the ability to focus on individual parts within a larger piece. Like, check out the hook to 6 Inch by Beyonce. Now, I'm gonna guess you noticed the vocals, they're hard to miss. If your ears are good enough, you might even be able to tell me about the structure of the melody, like the fact that she leaned on the flat 5 on the word heels, giving the whole thing a gorgeous bluesy sound. And you may have noticed the kick drum too. It's pretty prominent, setting up the beat with an extra attack a 16th note early so you really feel that impact. But let me ask you this, what was the guitar doing? Without skipping back and listening again, could you describe the guitar part in any significant detail? Did you even notice it was doing anything particularly interesting? I mean, it was. If you listen to the instrumental, it's much clearer. But in the full track, it's buried beneath other, more prominent layers of sound, so even though the song would be very different without it, it's hard to really lock in on. Orchestral listening is the skill of peeling back those layers, effectively creating an instrumental version, or whatever other mix you want, inside your head. And this is useful for a lot of things. Most obviously, it's useful for transcription. If you want to work out what's happening in a song, it helps to be able to hear what all the parts are doing, and that can be tricky when the vocals are screaming in your face. Good transcribers need to learn how to ignore the parts they don't care about at any given moment. This isn't a huge deal if you're just doing a lead sheet or whatever, but if you want to do a good, thorough transcription so that you or someone else can play the song and have it sound the same, you need to know exactly what that guitar is doing, and how are you supposed to work that out if you can't really hear the line. It's also helpful for analysis. When you're dealing with a complicated arrangement, it's easy to miss small flourishes that may wind up having a big impact, so developing a good sense of orchestral listening lets you quickly scan through a section and determine which areas deserve more attention. This doesn't have to be a full transcription or anything, but if you can quickly pick up the structure of each part, you can find the ones that are doing something interesting and work from there. Like, is the bass just playing chord roots? Because if so, you can probably roll it into your harmonic analysis, but if it's not, then you might want to look at what it is doing, because that could be the key to the whole piece. Plus, it helps make sure you know how many parts there are to analyze in the first place. I can't count the number of times I've started breaking down a song and suddenly heard a whole instrument I'd never noticed before. But even if you're just casually listening, taking an orchestral approach gives you more options for how to experience a piece of music. Like, longtime viewers will probably know that I'm not a huge fan of jazz. That's not to say there aren't plenty of jazz songs I enjoy, but the genre as a whole doesn't really do much for me. However, I absolutely love the sound of a walking bass, so whenever I find myself listening to jazz, I immediately key in on that bass line, tuning out the things that don't interest me as much and focusing on the best part. Orchestral listening lets me decide for myself how I want to hear a song so I can optimize it for my own tastes. And if you already like the music, that's even better because you can use your orchestral listening skills to take a deep dive into all the little nooks and crannies. You can explore the bass fill leading into the chorus, the cymbal pattern in the intro, that flute part you never knew was there, all those little flourishes that may not mean all that much on their own, but together combine to add almost infinite layers of nuance and depth. You can turn one song you love into dozens of different musical experiences just by choosing which parts to pay attention to. And finally, catching all those nuances is super valuable if you're looking to make music. The more deeply you understand your favorite songs, the better you'll be at capturing that same impact in your own work. A lot of the time, if you're working on a song and it starts to feel stale, you don't need to write a whole new section or anything to keep it fresh. All you need is a background line or some other change to one of the instrumental parts, and if you want to write a good one, you need to know what it sounds like when it's done right. Obviously, you shouldn't just be stealing licks or anything, but if you can familiarize yourself with the sorts of tools your favorite artists use, you'll have a better sense of the tools that are available to you too. So okay, this is useful, great, but how do you learn it? What sorts of practice will help you develop your orchestral listening skills? Well, as with most ear training stuff, the gold standard is gonna be transcription. The more you take songs and try to write down exactly what they're doing, going, the better you'll get at hearing what that is, and that includes breaking down the orchestration. I'd say this is the main way I've cultivated this skill. I do a fair amount of transcription for this channel, and over the years I've gotten a lot faster and a lot more accurate. If you're willing to put in the work, there's really no replacement for transcription. That said, if you haven't done it before, transcription can be slow, difficult, boring, and not particularly rewarding if you don't have anything to do with the transcriptions once you've made them, so while it's definitely what I'd recommend if you're looking to do this stuff professionally, there's also some lower effort practice techniques to help get you started, and the easiest one is to just, do it. When you're listening to music, try to focus in on different parts. You probably already have some level of orchestral listening skill just from your normal music listening experience, and the more you flex that muscle, the more it'll grow. That's easier said than done though, so if you're looking for a good entry point, my advice would be to start with the bass. It's not a lead instrument, so you'll have to go digging for it, but it's also usually playing a single note melody, which tends to be easier to follow than a set of chords, and it's pretty well separated in register from the rest of the band. Stuff in the mid-ranges can be hard to isolate because they're competing with the vocals, but the bass is so low that the only real obstacle is the kick drum, and since that's non-melodic, it's relatively easy to tell the two apart. Speaking of which, you can also try locking into the percussion. Drum parts in modern popular music tend to be based on one of a couple standard patterns, and knowing what to expect can make it easier to hear. Once you start to get a hang of that, the next step is to sing along. This forces you to not just passively experience the line, but actively process it too. This will obviously work better for some instruments than others, but if you're working on a part with full chords, you can at least sing along with the highest or lowest note in the voicing. You're not trying to transcribe or anything, you're just trying to internalize the rhythm and general shape of the part. But if that's still too difficult, you might want to turn to my favorite resource for training orchestral listening skills: stems. These are effectively isolated instrument tracks, and if you use the right search terms, they're not that hard to find, although distributing stems isn't necessarily the most legal thing ever, so I'm not going to tell you exactly how to do it. Still though, if you can get your hands on the stems to a song, or even just an instrumental version with the vocals removed, they're super helpful. All you have to do is listen to the isolated track, pick out all the nuances you can, then go back to the full band recording and try to find those same things there too. Once you know exactly what the guitar fill at the end of the chorus is supposed to sound like, it's way easier to actually hear it. Of course, you don't want to rely on stems forever. Your end goal is to be able to do all that without needing to actually isolate the parts first, but until you can consistently do it in your head, stems and other instrumental tracks can give you the boost you need in order to get started. Now, I can't speak for every music program in the world, but I know that when I took ear training classes, this was not something we focused on. It was all melodies, chords, and sometimes rhythms. Texture and the interaction of different musical layers were treated as an afterthought if they were even mentioned at all. Instead, they were shifted to a ranging class where we learned to think about them, but didn't spend much time practicing hearing them, and looking back, I think that's unfortunate. It's tempting to blame this on music academia's obsession with classical music, and don't worry, I'm still gonna, but it doesn't even make much sense in that context. Classical music is full of symphonies, operas, and other works with rich orchestral layering. This is probably even more useful there than it is in contemporary styles. So why don't we teach it? Is it too hard to explain? Do we assume students will figure it out on their own, or is this actually a way bigger part of most curricula and I just got unlucky? I don't know, but it's a shame because as far as I'm concerned, there's not many musical skills more universally valuable than a strong sense of orchestral listening. Another great way to develop your orchestral listening skills is by mixing music, but that's a bit outside my area of expertise, so if you want to learn to do it, you should really check out Skillshare. The great thing about controlling a mix is you get to break the song up into its component parts and then play around with the levels until you can hear everything just right, and Skillshare has a bunch of classes to teach you how to do that. I recommend starting with a course by Grammy-winning audio engineer Young Guru, where he walks you through his process of determining levels, adding effects, and organizing a soundscape. It's a great introduction to the process of mixing, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. Skillshare has thousands of classes on all sorts of topics like instruments, songwriting, music business, and even non-music stuff like cooking, graphic design, and productivity. If you want to check it out, the first 1,000 12-tone viewers to click the link in the description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium with full access to all their classes, and if you like what you see, sticking around is super affordable with premium plans starting under $10 a month. And hey, thanks for watching, thanks to our Patreon patrons for making these videos possible, and extra special thanks to this video's featured patrons, Duck and Howard Levine. If you want to help out and help us pick the next song we analyze too, there's a link to our Patreon on screen now. You can also join our mailing list to find out about new episodes, like, share, comment, subscribe, and above all, keep on rockin'.